So hey everyone, I'm Akshat Paul. I'm an author and a developer. I also of a digital expert at my place of work called McKinsey and Company. As Chrissy mentioned, I had authored few books on the topic of React Native and Ruby. Ruby being my one of my favorite programming language where I started. So that's my homage to Ruby development. But of course, for last few years, I've been working consistently in JavaScript framework, specifically React Native. Also technical reviewer for few other books also related to React and architecture in general. Feel free if you would like a copy of any of these books, just ping me. I'll try to grab a PDF for you, complimentary, and you can go through it, give me feedback, and learn and share, of course. Some of the previous event pre-COVID, where I had given few talks ranging on of my favorite topics, which includes technology, but also healthy lifestyle. Of course, I've gained some weight working from home for last 6-7 months. But yeah, that's another facet of my life. You can follow me on Twitter or connect with me at akshatpaul.com. Why I've specifically mentioned it, because I think one thing which I miss not going to conference for almost 8-9 months now is connecting with the community. But hopefully we all can connect virtually through Twitter, or if you want to discuss or work or pair on some interesting problem, just buzz me on akshatpaul.com, where you can see where I'm giving my next talk, or my blog, which I try to write not so frequently, but I try to write it as often as possible. So please do connect. I always love to interact with new developers, young developers who have any issues or stuck somewhere. Happy to help. So agenda for today. Uh, what is accessibility? Many of you might be using accessibility. Many of you might know what is accessibility, but there is always some folks who have no idea why accessibility, what is the purpose of it, what exactly is accessibility, who is it for. That's a very important question, and I'll try to put up a case. Who is it for? Is it for a small minority, or is it a larger section of people who get left out because of inaccessible things everywhere? How to design for accessibility, how to code for accessibility, pretty important. Our demo, where we will use React Native to make a commonly inaccessible application into accessible one. What are the tools which we can use to make our development process easier, and how to plan for accessibility? So it looks quite a lot, but I'm pretty sure we'll run through it quite fast, because this is a very interesting topic, especially when I discovered it a few years back. So, what is accessibility? Accessibility refers to design of products, devices, services, or environments for people who experience disabilities. It can be vision, cognitive, hearing. The word environment here, if you see, I've underlined it, is very, very important, because change in environment can literally solve the problem altogether. Let's look at how we do it. You all must have experienced in day-to-day life, you must have seen it at least. The most common way how an environment, a modification of environment changes, make things accessible from inaccessible, is curb cuts, which we see at every street corner, and friendly ramps in malls, in office places, public or private spaces, which this small change, this minor change in the construction, totally have an impressive change for people with certain disabilities. These are few of the examples. So going back again, what is accessibility? Accessibility essentially is enabling access for people with disabilities or special needs with the help of accessible design, which we saw in previous slide, and assistive technology. So what is assistive technology? I've once again underlined it. So curb cuts change our environment. Example, curb cut is an example. Change our environment to make things, to improve things. But assistive technology further augments and make things comfortable, manageable, and accessible for the users. Let's look at for the same example a wheelchair. Of course, I gave an example uh, of a friendly ramp and curb cut. A wheelchair totally fits in. It's an example of assistive technology. Hearing aid, braille, which is one of the oldest form of assistive technology, uh, uh, which I can think of. But in 2020, and in this century, and especially 2020, smartphones are at the top of the assistive technology, with the power of the operating system they have. They really rank towards the top in making things very easier for different users. So now we know what is accessibility, what is how an environment can have an impact on accessibility, and how assistive technology combined with it creates something called universal design. Um, but who is it for? Let's take few example of inaccessibilities. It's with people having vision issues like blindness, low vision, color blindness, people with hearing issues such as deafness, muffling of speech and other sounds, difficulty in understanding a few words or accents, and trouble in understanding trouble in understanding certain consonants. So that is something related to hearing issues. Cognitive issues, learning disabilities, distractibility, inability to remember or focus. You must be thinking that these are disabilities for a very small section of users or customers, clients, thing. And so we go back to this question again: who is it for? Uh, so, in order to check who exactly is it for such a small minority that can be ignored, or there's a much larger group of people who would require accessibility features to be built in or available in the real world and in our virtual world? So I did a small experiment, and this is the city center of a city I was visiting at that time, a few couple of years back, Wrocław, in Poland. And what I did is I went to the city center and I clicked the picture of city center, and and then of course when I came back, I was watching this picture. So the one picture you see on your left is when I was wearing my specs, and the one you see on your right is the one when I'm not wearing the specs. So essentially what I'm trying to say is that my specs are my assistive technology, and accessibility is not just limited to for few people, for a very small section of people who have maybe a natural disability, but it is for everyone. So I hope I'm able to put up a case uh, for accessibility for in front of all of you in these limited slides, uh, uh, because essentially the moment we add them, we actually cover all the cases. We not just cover all the users, but we also cover all the cases which require accessibility for all our users. Did you somebody just ping me? Let me just check on my time also. I'm pretty good with time, I can say. So now that I believe I had your curiosity on the topic of accessibility. I hope now I have your attention too about why accessibility is essential uh, for everyone. So let's look at these temporary issues for which accessibility becomes essential for any user, such as broken bones, recovering from an illness, loss of your assistive device. The example which I gave you in previous slide, when I needed my specs in order to have a look at those pictures. And what if I don't have those specs? It's broken. What would I do? We'll know how we can solve that later on. Technical issues, if there is a slow connection, smaller or larger form factor screen size, old technology, specifically in the world of mobile apps and cell phones, the technology keeps changing and updating very quickly. So does your app support all these old technologies with backward upward compatibility or not? Crisis mode. Crisis mode is something when the user is not able to think clearly or is stressed. One example here I can give is when uh, imagine you're using a hospital application and you want to you're in a crisis. There's somebody ill in your home and they need to go to emergency. So if the application has a SOS button which is hidden or sleeping somewhere in the hamburger menu or not very visible to the user, uh, the user won't be able to access it in time, and it's pretty much waste for a application, for a healthcare application or a hospital application. So these are few of the common things where even a regular user, which is a regular user of our application, of our software, become a kind of a disabled user who requires these accessibility features to be fit in place for them to make use of our software. Next, now let's look at code for accessibility with React Native. And before we get into that, in general, in the mobile world, what are the options available? So out of box, there are two options available. One is iOS voice over, which is available for Apple devices, which is available for both iPhone, iPad, even Mac computers. There is Android Talkback, which is a re-Christian to accessibility suite recently. I don't know why. Maybe they are getting more features into them. Uh, Both of them are basically screen readers, gesture based screen readers, which assist the user in order to take right decision, since they are not able to access the user interface of the application. Beside this, there are other accessibility features in these operating system, uh, such as assistive touch, switch control. But they are like default features of the device. They have nothing to do in modification of our code or programming our application according to them. Voice over is most widely used in order to make our app accessible. So let's go into making our application accessible with React Native. So you can see two code snippets on your screen. One is accessible true, and the second one is accessibility label. I'll explain what are these, and these are pretty much two most widely used and almost 50 or 70% of the times to make your application accessible. You can use these two lines of code and pretty much make your application accessible. uh, Rest are some specific features and we'll get into them as we proceed. So now it's time for demo. So let me pause the show for a minute and get my simulator, get my terminal first of all, and maybe change my screen. Just a minute. Let me. This is the one. Yes. All right. So this is my terminal, which you can. 1 minute. This is my terminal, which you can see. So let me start my app. Yes. Meanwhile, I'll have some water also. All right. The Metro Burner is starting. I would also need a reflector to show you uh, my device, because we'll also place this application on Let's also start iOS simulator, and also I would show this to you on my device, and I'll tell you the reason why I'm using my device. All right, cool. That is good. All right, cool. I can pause it for a minute. So I've created a nifty app here, just a simple profile application uh, to let to show the name, picture. I saw Ed from Geekle. I just picked this picture, some phone number. I believe it's Geekle's phone number and their email ID. So before, so let's see how accessible this application, and how we can test it is using accessibility inspector. So this is accessibility inspector, and it's a universal tool which we can make use of whenever we are programming on Mac. Let me just stop it for now. And it allows us to inspect our application. We can also run let me first inspect our application. So here you go. So what you see here is that when I hovered on this application, the whole application, if you see, you can see the label here, which says, let me pause it. Yeah, the label here, which means that the application, that this specific application, everything is jumbled up into one section only. It's not split into. Uh, I hope you can see my screen. Mhm. All right. Yeah, Chrissy, can you see my screen?
Ты можешь ему написать?
Він мене питає
Чи онлайн?
підключити мене.
Онлайн.
Hi.
Uh, yeah. Hey, Chrissy, can you see my screen?
I
Yeah, now you can, right?
yes, now I can.
Okay.
But there seems to be something on the screen that we need to get rid of.
Okay.
Private ID.
There's just some technical issues. There's a. I think it should be okay now, right? Okay, it's good.
It's not promoted.
So feel free to continue what you were saying. I'm so sorry for the interruption.
Okay.
Еще раз.
Like you were able to see my screen, or what screen you were able to see?
Your screen. I can't see your screen right now.
Okay. But earlier, like, where should I continue from? That's what I wanted to know.
Pick up where you left off while we try to figure out what went wrong.
Okay. Now, just tell me what you're able to see. You're able to see
Okay,
the
copy.
black screen. That's right, and a simulator with Ed on it, right?
Yeah, the simulator with Ed, we're trying to remove that actually.
Oh, okay.
Um,
All right.
we're-
I can use some other image if you want. I just added that just to make it more cross-platform. I can quickly change it to someone else. So maybe
okay.
myself.
Sorry, everyone. These things happen.
All right. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. That's now you can see it's very fast in React native. Where did I put Ed? Let me just. Yeah, here it is. Oops. One minute. Here it is. Sorry. Okay. All right. Hope this is good. I hope this is fine. And let's continue, guys, with our demo. That was kind of funny. So let's go back to Accessibility Inspector where we had left. So we will again check our application, pause it here. Let's dismiss this. And as you can see here, it's the whole section is selected. So what will happen is that when I will show you, when I use voiceover, this whole it's like a div which has all the content merged into one section. So what will happen is that when the user will try to use voiceover, will not get appropriate answer for its desired value. Like if I have to go to the phone number or email, I cannot go. I have to traverse it from the root of the tree. So let's try it out on our reflector. 1 minute. Let me just reconnect this. Yeah. Meanwhile, also tunnel this and send me a mail, because sometimes it just does not open without an email. All right. 9517. Okay. Cool. Now we are mirroring our application. And let's also open this one and place the accessibility inspector in between. All right. Now I'll quickly show you. Yes. Meanwhile, the application loads. So recently, uh, around the start of this year, late last year, Apple somehow removed its voice over Mac voice over support for the iOS simulator testing. So it has become it becomes slightly hard to test, but we can actually test it using accessibility inspector also. But the best way to test how uncomfortable an application can become if it is not built for accessibility, that's why I wanted to show you a demo live on the device. My network is slightly slow. You cannot see it behind the reflector icon. It's just few percentage more. Meanwhile, I can show you some of the features of accessibility inspector. We can do other stuff like inverting colors to check if the application works fine. Uh, its color palette is taken correctly. Like if you see this application where I have taken both the background and the image, which is same, it becomes totally unreadable. Even the text is pretty incorrect choice of color. And other options are increasing of contrast, reducing transparency, reducing motion, full access of keyboard. There is also something called using the audit. Yeah. So if you select which specific application you want to test for whether it's accessible enough or not, you can click. You can select that specific application and then run the audit. So this application, of course, is terribly built, and it does not. It has pretty bad audit. Uh, Cool. Going back on this, now this application on the left is the live application. Let me open voiceover to test out how it works. Mm, yeah, let me just switch it on.
Voiceover on. Settings. Accessibility. Back button. Accessibility. Back button.
Yes.
Calendar. Home.
Now let's go to
Google
our
Maps.
application.
App switcher. Expo. Expo. Active. Expo.
So
Ednet and I am the CEO. +1 6505.
So as you can see, I cannot select specific part.
Ednet and I am the CEO. +1 650.
So as you saw, I cannot I cannot access other parts of this application because it's totally stuck in that one section of the application because all the content is merged. So let's make this application accessible. And how we can do it? Simply, let's go to our code. Let's go to our code. Let me zoom it. So I had made this view accessible true, and this what it does is that it's the purpose of using accessible true is let me just refresh it meanwhile. Okay, refreshed. Now let me show you first. Yes.
650 +1 6 info at Keyclerk.
So now
work.
it's working
Keyclerk.
fine.
Info at Key +1
Right.
650.
Yes. Now
5,
let's
3,
just
4, 2 0 7.
close this. Now let's just close it. Otherwise, it'll keep on speaking. And let's go back. So I just wanted to show you how the voiceover actually works when you want to test. Now, same thing will happen here. It's better to use accessibility inspector. So now all our elements are divided accordingly. The purpose of using accessibility true is if we want to merge certain section. Why would we want to do that? Example, so that we can add a label to it. There are times when we don't need the whole application all the sections of the application to be divided. We need some specific label, or we also want some custom function to be triggered based on that specific section. In that case, we would also like to add a label to that part. So now if we go back, since our application is reloaded, I think it's not. Let me just switch it back to LAN so that it's faster. Yeah. So now let me check. If you can see here again, although the section is selected, but it has a label to it, all profile detail. So the user does not have to go through all the details of that section. So sometimes there are cases and use cases where we want to merge a section specifically for the imagine that that feature is not required when you are on voiceover, so why to go through that whole section? So in that case we just merge it, add a label to it. We can also put a custom function based on the click or whatever event we want, and then move forward. So this is how we can make an inaccessible app accessible, and how we can make certain section of the application specific for accessible user. So let's go back to our presentation to look at some more functions. And mhm, yeah, okay, that is the one. Sure. Cool. Okay. So yeah. So basically, accessibility label are pretty much very simple, and you can be creative to use them for various sections of your application in order to make it accessible. And it's really simple because it's totally baked in React Native, so we don't have to include any specific special package and any specific library. This is the best part of this whole feature of accessibility, is that it comes right default in React Native for both iOS and Android, and we just have to be little cautious of our design, how we are building the application and programming. So let's look at few other key properties which we can use in order to make our application accessible. So there are times when we have multiple sibling views or child views of our application. So accessibility view is model is used when we want to ignore voiceover for certain elements. Imagine you have two sibling views, A and B, and you don't want a voiceover for you add accessibility views model on view B, so view A will be ignored. So out of these two sibling, view B will be ignored. However, there is a child element which is C for A, that will not be ignored. So something specific we want to ignore in between, we can simply add the add accessibility views model there. Similar is accessibility element is hidden. Here it's opposite. The one we want to hide, we add this property in that view, and its sibling will be ignored. These are most commonly used. That's why I'm sharing only sharing these specific properties. The counterpart for this in Android is important for accessibility, which has a Boolean value, yes, no, and important for accessibility, which has a default value as no hide descendants. Then there are few very specific iOS methods, and which are also very are readily used. First one is on accessibility tab, which is this property is used if you want to create your custom functions, which I had mentioned earlier. That on one on gesture of a click, some other function is triggered, anything like a notification or an email or whatever has to be done, or uh, and the magic tap is a special gesture which is for accessibility user on iOS devices, which is a double tap with two fingers, which can then be linked to other which can be linked to some custom function, and can be triggered in multiple ways. Some other commonly used accessibility properties are accessibility label. We have shared accessibility hint, very similar to accessibility label. Then there is accessibility value. There is accessibility role, which helps us define whether something is a button or a radio button or a checkbox, so that the user know what action has to be taken. if it's a checkbox, that means it can be multiple can be selected. If it is a radio button, so that the user can make a decision accordingly. So those are most of the popular accessibility methods. The list of accessible methods are not very long if you go through documentation, because some stuff we do is custom, and majority out of these 5-10 methods we can build our application totally accessible. So and now going to the tools of for accessibility, and also let me have a look at my time. I think we have some more time. So let's continue with tools for accessibility. We saw accessibility inspector, uh, how easily it can be used and very readily we use it. But that's actually our starting point when we are testing our application and while we are programming. Then the counterpart for this in Google is accessibility scanner, which also gives tips to make your application accessible. Similar how accessibility inspector also runs the whole audit and gives us a few recommendations. Uh, but programming is important, but equally important is designing for accessibility, which means our design itself should be in tune with making the application accessible in various parameters. And let's look at a few of these parameters.
Hi, Akshat. Very quickly, we are running over our time limit a little bit. Would you be able to wrap up
Okay.
in the last 2 minutes?
Yes, yes. Yeah, I have just few more slides, so I'll just wrap up quickly.
Okay, thank
All right,
you.
cool. Let's continue. So the first one is, of course, layout. Layout of an application, as I mentioned earlier, must be form factor agnostic. So if something is working on a phone, it should work on a tablet. It should work on various phone devices. It shouldn't be that the whole layout go for a toss if a new device comes into market. So our layout, we must look into layout and design accordingly. Then, of course, the contrast of the application, the color palette which we choose. It should not be that the application works fine in indoors but not in daylight. And also, when I showed you in accessibility inspector, we invert the colors and check that the colors are working fine. Like if somebody switches to dark mode, or anything else, or any other color palette, it should not just go for the toss. The interface should be simple and thought should be given to it. The whole tree should be well arranged for various components, so that the user does not get confused. The example which I gave you, the hospital app or a healthcare application, where the SOS button should be at the right place so that it can be used at the right time. The last part is typography. Typography, by typography, I mean choosing correct font types and type spaces, fonts of font width, its strongness, so that it is readable for our user. Lastly, let's go to, we should always plan for accessibility, so that we can build accessible application. Sorry for these slide, it has the previous demo example. We should identify our goals, create persona. The accessible user persona must be a part of various user types. Everyone should be educated about accessibility, so that overall we are more empathetic towards this cause. And of course, we cater to all types of users. Um, Lastly, accessibility not just increases our user base, but there are also other properties which comes when we make accessible user. We empower our users. It's about human rights. It's about equality. It's about inclusiveness, diversity, social justice. All great things. And if you would have been a web developer, I would have also told you about increasing your SEO. That is also one reason. But of course, these reasons are enough to build accessible application for even mobile apps. Uh, I leave you all with two of my favorite quotes whenever I have to pitch accessibility in a more poetic manner. Accessibility allows us to tap into everyone's potential by Deborah Rowe, who is a very popular accessibility advocate, both in the real world and software world. And accessible design is good design by Steve Ballmer, and because that totally makes sense. So that's a wrap. Thank you, everyone, and sorry for the glitches and trying to make it more cross-platform mobile summit friendly. So I'll make sure always discuss the demo earlier. I hope it wasn't too much trouble, Chrissy.
No,
For
not at all. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah.
I mean, we all found
I
it
think
very interesting. Did you have a good
we
time?
are on time. I had a good time. Yes, I had a good.
Good.
I had a most advanced, I would say, setup. I think that's why you must be. I'm looking here and there again and again. So I think I placed a very advanced setup for a talk. Because this topic required multiple devices, so
Yeah.
I think and it was fun. Yes, virtually
Good.
sitting
We
at my
had
home.
fun as well.
Yeah,
Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
cool.
And good luck.
All right. Thank you, Chrissy. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Bye. We are right on time, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
All right. See you
Cool.
later.
See you. Bye bye.